Some people prefer relaxing, easy games to unwind, while others prefer sweaty, edge-of-your-seat competition. Now, how does one get into or convince their friends to join the competitive fun? With the right games, of course. Not all competitive multiplayer games are made equal. Some games are ruthless in terms of how fierce the competition can be, take hours to learn, or just aren't that interesting for new players. Sure, Counter-Strike and Dota 2 are massively popular, but I wouldn't use them to introduce someone to competitive gaming. Thankfully, there are more forgiving games that can make anyone a fan of some friendly competition. MOBAs hold several of the world's most popular competitive multiplayer games, like Dota 2 and League of Legends. However, the genre can be a bit difficult for new players to get a hold of. They have an extremely unique gameplay loop, and there's a lot you need to know before playing competitively. Smite has to be the easiest MOBA to introduce yourself to the genre with. It functions much like a third-person hero shooter, but with MOBA tropes like minions, towers, junglers, and traditional MOBA roles. That means that if you can handle basic third-person shooting mechanics, you can easily be introduced to MOBA mechanics through playing the game and not studying. The game also comes with a variety of alternate, simpler game modes to assist in learning. Of course, there are over 100 characters to choose from and dozens of items, so there is a lot to master. Thankfully, it's free to play, so you can test the waters with no risk.
Card games, while extremely competitive, can also be very slow-paced and monotonous at times. A deck of playing cards doesn't hold a candle to video games in terms of exciting visuals and complex gameplay mechanics. However, some games merge the two. Hearthstone, with its fast-paced and colorful visuals, has all the competition of playing cards in the most cutthroat retirement home, but in a more attention-grabbing format. Matches often last less than 10 turns, but they still have an immense amount of complexity with the game's 11 different classes and thousands of cards. It's free to play, easy to pick up, and fun to learn, but with depth that makes it great for both beginners and experts of the genre. And unlike many old-school collectible card games, you don't have to keep track of your cards. That game does that for you.
Call of Duty can be divisive, but few competitive shooters are easier to get into. Its strong skill-based matchmaking, which is controversial, should ideally place a new player into matches with other new players. It's also very straightforward, with classes not having an extreme effect on performance. The instant respawn times will keep you constantly in the action, giving you more time to learn the ins and outs. But while Call of Duty Black Ops 6 is easy to get into, that doesn't mean there isn't a high skill ceiling. At the highest level of play, Call of Duty is extremely competitive, and the game becomes more about winning various game modes and simply getting the most kills. Hero shooters are great introductions to competitive multiplayer games as they tend to be heavily streamlined, and the easiest to get into has to be Marvel Rivals. It has flashy characters that you probably already know and love, like Spider-Man and Wolverine. Each character only has a few abilities to keep track of, so the game doesn't take long to learn. And like much of its competition, it's also free to play. However, while it is easy to get into, that doesn't mean it's less competitive than other hero shooters. At the highest levels, Marvel Rivals can be as competitive as other hero shooters, like Overwatch 2.
While not the easiest game to get into, the amount of creativity and endless strategies allowed in Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege can be immensely compelling, even to new players. While there are plenty of tried and true strategies, there's nothing wrong with coming up with new ones. Perhaps it's putting a hole in a wall at a weird angle or placing traps somewhere people will never expect. Once you're used to the leaning, clunky movement and one-shot headshots, the real game of outsmarting your enemy introduces itself. There is a lot to memorize at the highest levels of play, but the game doesn't make it miserable to learn. Rainbow Six Siege X is also partially free to play, meaning it won't cost you a dime to learn the ropes.
Soccer, football, or whatever you want to call it, is notoriously competitive. Playing this sport with rocket-powered cars doesn't make it any less competitive, and it can make it more exciting. That's essentially what Rocket League is. Two teams fight to get a ball into the opposing team's goal, and they use rocket-powered cars to do so. It isn't bogged down by complex rules, so anyone can pick up and play it right away. And I do mean anyone, since it's free to play. The silly moments that rockets can create make the game a ton of fun, whether you're good at it or not. And the more you play it and have fun, the better and more competitive you will inevitably get. There's a reason it's lasted for over a decade.
Counter-Strike is one of the most popular games of all time. However, it's also one of the most arduous games to get into of all time. From the outside in, you might think it plays like a standard shooter. However, it has a confusing aiming mechanic. Accuracy is drastically reduced if you're moving at all. This can be immensely disorienting for players accustomed to running and gunning, as is often done in most shooters. A very similar but more forgiving game is Valorant. It's much like Counter-Strike, but with a friendlier player base, hero shooting mechanics, and overall more relaxed playstyle. That said, the nature of the game is still fiercely competitive, but that's what makes it fun. If you can get past the initial difficulties of learning the game, it will quickly become addictive as you try to get better and better.
Battle royales can be extremely intimidating, with even the more kid-friendly titles like Fortnite being excruciatingly competitive. Because of its building mechanics, a Fortnite probably isn't the best game for a newcomer to introduce themselves to the genre anymore. Apex Legends, however, is very straightforward. It's a battle royale, but with a hero shooter twist. Sure, there is a bit of a learning curve when it comes to knowing every ability, but the most important skills of looting and shooting are easy to pick up. Since 20 teams are competing for victory, you can look at it as having a 1 in 20 chance of winning, but don't expect to win anytime soon if you're new. However, regardless of winning, the gameplay loop is a lot of fun.
Playing as Nintendo's fan-favorite characters like Kirby and Pikachu can be a good enough reason for many to get into this fighting game. But that's not the only reason to play. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is a simple game with a deceptively high skill ceiling. More importantly, it's a ton of fun that can be shared with up to 7 other people at once. It's easy to get into, but with 82 fighters and 103 stages, it is hard to truly master. This combination will quickly suck you into the loop of getting better and better so that you can beat your friends and be king or queen of the living room.
Dead by Daylight is competitive, but in a different way than most games. It's asymmetrical. There are multiple survivors on one team and a single killer on the opposing team. This creates an interesting twist that can suck in people who are otherwise uninterested in competitive games. The gameplay is straightforward to understand, with survivors attempting to repair generators to escape and Maidlady Killer trying to prevent them from escaping. Most of the gameplay revolves around movement and quick-time events, making it very easy to learn. That said, there are still complexities to the game that make it difficult to master, such as the various skills of each killer. Whether you're good at it or not, teaming up with your friends to try to outsmart a rampaging killer is a great gateway to competitive games.